Recovery is stupendous.
Achievable.
Hope.
Freedom.
Empowering.
It's unique to everyone.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Getting a new lease on life.
It's finding restoration after you fall down.
Recovery is having the freedom to enjoy life.
For me, it was finding a way to really love myself.
My recovery is possible in part because of my own sense of purpose.
Welcome to Montana's Peer Network Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Jim Haney.
And I'm Mandy Nunes.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Talks. Today, Mandy and I are going to talk about recovery, kind of go back to the basics and just share our thoughts around recovery and how maybe our thoughts have changed from when we started to now and what it means to us, because it's different for everybody, right? Right, Mandy?
Yeah, it's absolutely different for everybody. And I think everybody's journey is a little bit different. And I think as we grow in recovery and grow in our lives, our definition for ourselves and what it means to us evolves as we evolve.
Yeah, for sure. I think for myself, I can remember, when I discovered that having with a mental health diagnosis that I could be in recovery. Because recovery in some ways I feel like sort of gets hijacked by the 12-step community.
Yeah.
That if you say to just the general public, somebody who's not in recovery, and you say I'm in recovery, they immediately think you just mean exclusively AA, like from drinking, right? It's like that word is somehow exclusive to it. And I can remember when very early on was like, no, you can be in recovery from anything. And that really sort of blew my mind at the time, because I was certainly drinking too much and in a outpatient program. And so they used the words recovery a lot, right? I mean, I was in treatment and they used that word a lot, but we never talked about anything else. We never talked about any other forms of recovery. It was simply abstinence-based, just squared up like that, and don't talk about that other stuff. Don't talk about being depressed, and that concept really was like, and now, I mean, I have a lot of years in recovery, 28 years, I think I'm at now, 29 in like 6 months. Yeah, it's so different today. I mean, it's just so different. And of course, when you start working in this field, it changes. But that early, I was really thinking about with this topic, I was really trying to recall and think about early on the views of what it was and what it wasn't, and how limited my view of it was, my expectation of it was, and a lot of for the people around me too.
Yeah. I relate to that a lot. I think back, my first struggles, I guess, were not necessarily with substances. My initial struggles were mental health related. And the whole recovery concept had, never occurred to me. I was like 17, 18 years old, kind of having my first real, like, acute mental health stuff going on. And the term recovery wasn't used back then, even when I was going through mental health stuff, like when I was hospitalized,
right?
The term recovery wasn't thrown around in those settings back then.
Right.
The word recovery, didn't really come into my purview until I did have problems with substances and got into a lot of trouble, and the Montana Department of Corrections helped me figure out that that's what I needed in my life. And so my early views of recovery were all abstinence-based, SUD related.
Mhm.
Granted, while I was in treatment court and going to treatment, like I did have a mental health diagnosis, and I did have a ton of trauma. And so I'm grateful that where I went to treatment, they did, push me to work on those things too. I was set up with a trauma therapist and stuff like that. But still, the word recovery in and of itself wasn't used in relation to my mental health diagnoses or the, trauma or anything else. We still really only used recovery around the SUD diagnosis itself.
Yeah.
Sober and clean in 12-step meetings, depending on which one I went to at the time. It was
Yes.
a very limited understanding of what recovery meant.
Yeah. 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 I don't recall, just listening to you there, just, memories and thinking about, like, I don't remember anybody talking to me about holistic wellness and environmental things and financial things and spiritual things. Like, I don't really recall that being part of it, right? It's like you're
Yeah.
saying, I mean, it's like super limited 12-step abstinence. And yeah, that I would, same for me. I mean, I got into recovery in 94. And so they, it was a dual diagnosis, not co-occurring. Terminology was different, and it was very separate. It was very this view of you have this mental health stuff going on, and that's permanent. And if you, I mean, I can remember my doctor. Now, this is not my psychiatrist with the meds. This is my, what you'd call, general practitioner, saying to me, if you quit drinking, all your problems will go away. I totally remember that. Like, that was the frame of mind at that time, the way people thought about it, right? And here's a doctor saying that to me, and all of that goes in, right? That's all input into your experience of it. And then for me, I started focusing a lot on that, thinking, oh, okay, the doctor said that's what I need to do, so I'm going to focus, right? But then over time, you begin to realize, well, the other stuff isn't changing, like I'm
Right.
still, right? And thankfully, I had a counselor. I went also to a mental health center, separate, so then I could talk, about all of the stuff that was going on. But still, there really wasn't any focus on anything holistic, and the 8 dimensions of wellness weren't even created yet. That wasn't even in place, but there just wasn't this idea of there are other things you could do. Like, I remember, getting on medications, and you start putting on all this weight, all this water weight, right? Well, at the same time, this, and again, this is me looking back at it, right? The same time, I was eating a ton of sugar because I was coming off drinking.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Rum and Cokes, I'm down in 2-liter things of Coke every day, so my body is craving massive amounts of sugar, and I'm eating all this candy, and I'm taking these meds, and I'm putting on all this weight, and then I don't feel good, and I don't have the energy, and the whole, it's all wrapped up into one big ball of mess. And no one talked to me about that. Nobody talked to me and said, hey, eating 3 bags of lemon heads every day is probably not something you want to be doing, and you're craving the sugar because of all the alcohol you drank. You got to wean yourself off of that, like, and some exercise and some, right? Like,
Yep.
and all of that goes in, all of that's going in early on, and you're desperate and you're trying to figure out. And so no one's talking about those things. And it was just like, whatever, right? And you're still eating fast food, junk food. You're still doing all these other things.
Yeah.
And if I think about my life today, and, every day I bring my water bottle to work. I know you do too.
I do.
You drink, right? But no one talked. It just getting off soda. That was a big thing. I think I had a couple years in recovery, and I decided, yeah, soda's probably not that good for me, right? Like, I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly how I came to that conclusion, but I went like about 5 years, I think, and didn't drink soda pop. And whoa, this thing called water tastes pretty good. Like, and I feel so much better, but no one taught me that. Like, that wasn't part of a treatment program. That wasn't part of the protocols in helping somebody engage in recovery. I sort of discovered that outside. I became a bit of a seeker, reading lots of books, trying to seek out information, because what I was getting didn't seem to be working that well.
Yeah. It was kind of the same for me, honestly, like thinking back, and we didn't have back then, which wasn't all that long ago, 7-ish years. I didn't have a peer support specialist, back then. And like I said, I was encouraged to go work on like my trauma and stuff like that. But again, the term like holistic approach, or, I don't think I heard that phrase, a holistic approach, with regards to substance use, mental health, recovery in any form, until I took PS 101 training. And it, or the many pathways like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had not heard that until I took PS 101 training.
Yeah.
And it, it made me think about it. Like, I remember, God, my life was so messy still, even, going to treatment and everything else. And it's like you said, I was focused so much on that one thing. Like, I have to get over the use of substances and find a new way of life that doesn't include, chemically altering, my mind and my mood and everything else. How do I deal with all this stuff? How do I deal with my feelings? But I was drinking energy drinks like they were going out of style, and smoking, pack and a half of cigarettes a day at the, 12-step meeting, and drinking coffee, and not that any of those things, are horribly bad. Cigarettes might be, but no concept of how the other things that I was putting into my body was affecting me, or even the things that I was choosing to do, how I was choosing to spend my money. No concept of financial wellness, no concept of environmental wellness.
Right.
None of those. It was all about, how do I learn to live without substances,
Right.
and function, a little bit, I guess, in the real world. And it took a long time, and it took coming into this field as a career and seeing it through a different set of eyes, I guess, and hearing other people's stories and seeing what other people were choosing to do, and the parts of their wellness that they were focused on that had not even occurred to me. I remember the first time I went to treatment, first 2 times I went to treatment, the place I went to treatment at, we could go outside, we would go outside for smoke breaks, but it was, you could still smoke back then. And we would walk the track, but we were not allowed to exercise. We were not allowed to exercise because it was like an insurance thing. Like, they were afraid that we were going to hurt ourselves exercising. We weren't allowed to exercise. And we all, for the record, because they told us we couldn't, it's probably like the
Yeah.
most intentional I've ever exercised in my life. It was like
Yeah.
every day we were like hiding in our rooms doing crunches and push-ups just because they
Right.
told us that we couldn't. But it's interesting because I know that we're starting to look at, and even, you know,
Yeah.
the organizations where they do, you know, co-occurring treatment, SUD treatment, whatever, are starting to try and take a more
Yeah.
holistic approach where,
Yeah.
you know, fitness and nutrition
Right.
is being considered. And
Yeah.
my life has changed a ton. I don't smoke anymore. I don't drink. I can't even drink caffeine at all. Um,
Yeah.
you know, part of that is I focused so much on the SUD for so long
Mhm.
and didn't focus on kind of the original core problem,
Mhm.
which was my mental health. And so it took me years and years of, honestly, years of being in recovery and then having this mental health stuff kind of bubble up to the surface during COVID that made me realize that I still have a whole lot more recovery that I've got to work out
Yeah.
that's mental health related. It's not even related to my SUD.
Right.
And so
Right.
that shifted my thought process and my belief system around recovery and what does recovery look like for me.
Mhm.
Because so much of my recovery, especially today, is not based around 12-step meetings or
Right.
no, it's based around the things that I choose to do in my everyday life. And you know, I've done EMDR. It's all based around how do I improve my quality of life with my mental health condition.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
involves taking medications and not drinking caffeine for me because that makes my anxiety super bad. So
Right.
I cold turkeyed coffee. It's these like
Right.
little everyday choices that I have to make. We talked about it with seasonal stuff too. The little everyday choices that I
Right.
have to make to improve my quality of life with
Yes.
these mental health diagnoses.
Right.
And
Right.
what does wellness look like
Yes.
for me in my life? It's not what I thought recovery was when I got started. It's very
Right.
different. It
Right.
involves every aspect of my life, not just I'm not using substances.
Agreed. 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 And I I feel like that's why so many people fail in recovery. And some people don't like that you say fail in recovery, but what I mean is they go to treatment, they try it, they relapse, they go to treatment, they try it, they relapse, they go to treatment, they try it, they relapse. There's this, we know, you and I both know people like that who are just stuck in that cycle. Now, they try it for 6 months, they try it for 6 years, and they're right back where they were because the system and like society isn't quite there. Like you said, with this holistic, it has to be all aspects within your life because it's really about wellness. And I'm like you, years ago, I quit the caffeine. And that was part of the soda thing. Stop drinking soda. I was never a big coffee drinker. But yeah, you go to a support meeting and it's everybody smoking and drinking down in coffee, and you're there talking about substances. And it's like, well, these are substances. You're still putting these chemicals into your body and you're doing it at such an excessive rate.
Right.
And it's accepted. And, I think to myself, imagine if we could get to this place where recovery was really this full holistic approach in all these different areas. And that becomes the expectation, right? And we're not just focused on abstinence. We're focused on diet. We're focused on exercise. We're focused on spirituality, financial, even social, right? That's the one people run into right away. That was hard, right? It's like you get into recovery. You say, well, I'm being recovery. Okay, what do I do this weekend? Because all my friends, they're still drinking and partying. And, I tried that. I tried to show up and and what did they do? It's like, all right, Jim's back. Hey, have a drink. I mean, so getting around healthy people and or people who support your wellness
Yes.
is key, right? Like and I tried, educating people who were around me. This is in the real early stages. I tried sharing things that I was reading, things that I was learning through counseling, through the mental health center, through the treatment facility. I tried sharing that, and people have different reactions to that stuff, because it makes them look at their own. It makes them look at their own stuff, and some people don't. Then they just sort of drift away. They just you hand them a little thing here. Read this about right. Dual diagnosis, mental health trauma, oh, okay, thanks, right? Like, and it's interesting, and it's but it's so critical to have that, that you're, the people who are around you are such an integral they're part of your environment, they're part of your social network, they're part of your emotional piece, and so finding that new group of people can be challenging, be right, because then that's what I mean by people, they try it, they try what they learned, and then they fail because they're still hanging around the same people, or they're still in the same relationship, and then there's this loop that begins happening. So hey, I'll just go back to treatment. I must not have got it, I'll go back to treatment, but maybe the treatment isn't really the right fit because we're approaching it in a very limited sort of blinders on. We're looking at it as it's this one thing. And, as people get into recovery and you get more time in, and, your life begins to improve, you begin to realize it's all this other stuff. And you have to keep doing things every day for your wellness. And even that evolves over time.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree too that the social aspect is really important, especially early on. And I do think that that's one of the things that 12-step communities do well, or try to do well, or at least that was my experience, is it does provide that social, here are healthy people for you to spend time with. They've been down a similar road or the same road as you. They share similar experiences. They'll take you kind of under their wing. They'll help show you what things you can do to have fun in recovery. And so I think that for me was super helpful early on.
Right.
I think the part that's challenging is that it's still really limited.
It's very limited.
If I don't have an SUD, am I going to feel welcome to the 12-step meeting? This is different, if you don't fit the mold for, that 12-step community, you're isolated. And so that's hard.
That's what led me to smart recovery. What you're talking about right there. So early on, when anybody's gone to a treatment program knows you got to go to the treatment program, and then you got to go do 2 meetings a week, right? And so everybody starts off the same. You end up going to 12-step meetings, and yet I wasn't the mental health aspect wasn't being addressed. So I began, as I said, seeking, and so I found this other group that was going on, and went to that group. And what I found there was, they're talking about all of it. They're talking about your whole life. They're talking about it in a very different way. And they're using cognitive behavioral therapy language, which I was getting at the mental health center with my therapist, right? So I'm starting to hear the same language, and I'm going, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. All right. Like distorted thinking, thought patterns, those kinds of things. And and the other thing I really liked about it was strength based. It was not this is what's wrong with me. It was, what's something positive you did or you learned this last week for your recovery? Oh, whoa, that spoke to me. Whoa,
Yeah.
okay. I'm hearing all this positive stuff. People are, oh, I did this and I did that, and then what? And then my turn comes and I get to share something positive, and there's and then they gave us these worksheets. Here, do this worksheet, come back next week and we'll talk about this worksheet. And I liked that because I was a seeker. I was trying to figure out, and it gave me something to work on, a piece of paper to take home, to fill out, to answer these questions and think about it. And again, it fit really well with my counseling. So there was crossover there happening for me, and it was just different. And I remember going to the treatment facility and I turn in my sheet, the sheets, the sign in, you got to show the sign, what's this, what's this, they're scrutinizing it. I said, well, it says I have to go to a support meeting. It doesn't say I have to go to a 12-step meeting. This is a support meeting. What, wait, what is this? Like, it was a big deal. I had to go talk to the director and I said, well, I think there's a book or something. I think they have this book. Well, bring the book in, get a copy of the book and bring it in. Like, we need to examine this, if this is appropriate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, fine. So I go to the next meeting. So I talk to the facilitator. I say, look, I'm going to this treatment program. I got to go to, he goes, okay. He goes, you need a book, right? And I'm like, yeah, can I buy a book? He's like, no, here, you can have a book. And I look at the book and it's called The Small Book, right? And I'm like, oh man, this is not going to go over, so whatever, the next day or whatever it was, I went to so I went back in, I got my small book, and I'm like, okay, this is the book for the program, right? And, right, there was this skepticism about it. It was new, and yeah, they looked at it and then they said, okay, yeah, it's okay. Right? Because they saw in there, these are counselors, right? They see the concepts. It's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's teaching people about distorted thinking. And, so then they're like, okay, you can go to the meeting, it can count, but it's like that limited, blinders on, and it's like, and I didn't talk about it with the, the people in my group, I didn't talk that much about it. But, now I look back and I think, I wonder if there were other people in the group who might have liked this as a, and I would do both. I would do one 12-step and one of these smart recovery groups, and they were just so different. They were so different. And I those kinds of things, like, I feel like they were really important in that early part of my recovery, that kept me from falling into the rut of recovery, where you're just, well, it's just this. I don't know if I would have explored my mental health, my emotional health. I don't know if I would have explored it as much, because these other things make you explore those, your behaviors, your thoughts, right? This different approach, very strength-based. So all of that shaped my beliefs early on. And I borrowed from both, and I sort of mixed and matched. And like I said, I didn't tell people that, because I thought, I honestly felt like I was not, like, the word that comes to mind is doing something wrong, but not quite doing something wrong, but like I wasn't doing it this way.
Right, that it would be scrutinized.
Yeah, and so I kept it kind of quiet. Like, I talked to my therapist about it, and the people who were immediately around me knew, but other than that, I didn't really share that too much. I didn't really talk about that. And I think that, it was like years. I'm trying to remember, just, it's been a long time. I'm trying to remember how many years it actually was before I met somebody who had done the same thing or very similar. And it really was like, I mean, I think I was a peer supporter
Right.
when that happened. So for me, that's 14 years later, you know, somewhere in there, some 14, 15 years later, maybe when I went to training, when I went to peer support training. So I'd have had 15 years in recovery, and I kind of kept that quiet, that I tried these different things. I even went to there was a depression support group that I went to for a while, and everybody had a diagnosis of depression, and and I kept that quiet. And then I remember when somebody said to me, "Oh yeah, well, I kind of did this and I did that, and I found this smart recovery and this," and I was like, "Whoa, like, wait, what?" It was like, "Oh, there's another person here," like, and it was this revelation of, I was like, "Well, yeah, I kind of did the same thing," and I remember that moment thinking, "Oh, okay, right, like, whoa." Because all those years I sort of carried that with me, and yeah, and didn't feel settled with it. Didn't feel, I mean, it was working, it was working, but it wasn't the traditional path. And yeah, then when I started Montana's Peer Network and I got exposed to SAMHSA and the guiding principles, and then, like you said, you read many pathways and holistic, I went ding, 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 ding. This is what I've been searching for all of these years. And so by then, let's say be 14, 15, 16. So now I have 16, 17 years in recovery before I'm introduced to those bigger concepts.
Right.
Of you're in charge, you pick your own path. It can be this and that and this and that, and you can mix and match and whatever. The key is wellness. That should be in the beginning of everybody's recovery. We should be talking to people in the beginning about that. It shouldn't take people a decade plus before they finally meet someone else who took the same pathway, because the other person was probably feeling as weird as I was about it, right? In their journey, "Oh, don't tell anybody, I do these other things, I meditate, I whatever."
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we still, as a whole, as a society, as the behavioral health industry, however you want to put it, I think, especially with SUD, because I think that's where, again, we identify as recovery is SUD.
Yeah.
I think we missed the mark on the many pathways. I think we missed the mark on the voice and choice. It's still very dominated as this kind of abstinence-based 12-step model. That's the way, which works for some people, and that's great, and it's great for the people that it works for. But what about all of the people that want something different, that have a different spiritual belief, that have different, their brain works a different way, that their life is different? I mean, there's so many things that make each of us who we are. And we're missing people that don't fit this one size fits all mold, and that's horribly sad. There's so many options out there, but if people don't know that there's more than one way, if people don't know that they can choose, that they can have a voice, that they can find acceptance, that they can find wellness and recovery, in other ways, it's so easy to just lose them back to the struggles that they're already in. Because the reality is, at least for me, I was super dysfunctional, and the drugs were not a great solution. They created a whole new set of problems. But for the purposes that I was initially using for, they were effective in my mind. You know what I mean? They,
Of course, they're temporarily effective. Of course, that's why so many people turn to substances. Of
right.
course,
And
of
so
course, yes.
we're not showing people the way. And I don't mean the one way. I mean that there are many ways.
Right. Yeah, and it comes through exposure. You have to expose people to it. You have to allow them the opportunity to try yoga, try meditation, try changing your diet, try exploring the changing of your diet, try lowering your sugar intake, try taking financial responsibility by making a budget, you know, these kinds of things, because all of that is part of it. Right. And it's not, you know, there's lots of people who function and they use substances and, you know, they whatever, waste their money and, you know, right, have bad relationships. They have all this stuff happening to them, but they're still sort of functioning through the world. And this approach, as I, you know, get more and more years in recovery, I just see it more clearly. It's more about wellness and a holistic approach. And yeah, I think the system is slowly changing. And I wonder what would happen statistically if we did take a much more holistic, much more choice-oriented approach. I wonder what would happen statistically, because the numbers aren't very good. People who go to treatment programs, the vast majority of people don't maintain recovery. It's only while they're in treatment or right after, and then it just sort of falls off, right?
Or they don't maintain what that treatment center identifies as recovery, which is abstinence-based
Of course,
recovery.
of course. But you know, that idea of like introducing all of these concepts
Yeah.
to people and saying, you know, hey, this isn't about, you know, even the idea of, so I went to an outpatient program. I was in there 6 months. You know, you go, right, you do the 9 hours a week for 6 months, not 30 days inpatient. Because I remember having that thought too. I gotta go inpatient. I have to be hospitalized. I had that set in my head and I couldn't get into a program. There were no open beds. I didn't have insurance, right? So I settled for an outpatient program. But when I look back in hindsight, that was so much better.
Yeah.
Because I'm at home and I wasn't working for the vast majority of that time. I wasn't working. I couldn't work. I couldn't function. But going to treatment, going to therapy, medications, you know, all these kinds of things, support groups, right? Then kind of towards the end, I was able to start working part-time, right? But that length of time, a 6-month program, not a 30 days and then see you later, you know, good luck to you. Like 6 months is a long time because you have that constant contact. You're learning the whole way. I think that's another piece that would change things. And I see that, you know, a lot of outpatient programs have housing now.
Yeah.
Where people can live in recovery housing and go to an outpatient program. I think that's, I actually feel like that's almost more effective than a standard short-term 30-day little cookie cutter boxed program. This is what it looks like, and you're going to do this. Longer period of time, allow people to address all these aspects of their life. I think it's more effective. It's definitely more supportive of people, you know, and I don't know, cost wise. I mean, I don't know. I've never ran the numbers to know, you know, which is which. But I think you're setting people up for a greater chance for success with a longer term program out in the community. Yeah.
I mean, treatment court. I was in treatment court for 22 months.
Wow.
And I needed every day of it, and all of it was outpatient for me.
Yeah.
And when I started, I was living at the homeless shelter here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then got into a sober living facility. And after doing that a little while, was able to start working part-time. Mm-hmm. But man, I think there's this like really kind of delusional hope or belief that like, oh, I did the 30 days and I'm
Yeah.
cured, I'm out, I'm on a pink
Yeah.
cloud, recovery.
Yeah. Yes.
And what's missed, which I think is what you're talking about, is when you're going to treatment, outpatient treatment for a longer period of time, it shows me I have to apply this to my life and see if it's going to work in the real world. I didn't
Yes.
really have, I also went to inpatient treatment at different times, but it's like you're so protected in an inpatient setting from real life stress, real life triggers.
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to say no when my coworker says, let's go grab a beer after work?
Yeah.
Or when
Yep.
one of my coworkers sparks up a joint out in the alley? Like,
Yep.
if I'm not ever, around those issues, those stressors, those triggers to make decisions, good or bad, right or wrong, whatever decision I make,
Yeah.
how am I going to figure out if I can make the right choices? And how do I figure out what the consequences look like when I don't? Because I
Yes.
didn't always in treatment court. Like I had a relapse in treatment court.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I did, because it gave me the opportunity to make a decision about how I was going to handle that. And people helped me through that time period and helped me make choices and get back on track. And I had support during those times, instead of getting out of treatment, doing good for a little while, messing up, not having the support, not knowing what to do, not having any guidance, and just throwing in the towel. I had support through all of that.
Right.
And I needed that, because my problem, I could do great in treatment in an inpatient setting.
Jump through the hoops. Right.
Right. My problem was real life.
Yeah. Yeah. Out in the community, out in the community. Yeah. You're so protected. It's the same when you're in a psychiatric hospital. It's the same. You're in this bubble, and it's this protective bubble. It protects you from everything, and you need it. In the very beginning, you would definitely need it, right? But the stuff that you left is still waiting for you the day you're discharged.
Yes.
Whereas when you're in an outpatient program, you have to deal with those things, like you said, everyday life, the stressors of everyday life. And yeah, I think it's much more effective. And I think we just have to keep advocating for more systems change, to be more, these treatment programs to be more holistic, to address these other areas of a person's life. And then I think that's when you see real sustainable recovery for people, because it's more about overall wellness.
Yes. And more person-centered.
For sure. More person-centered. Yes.
A big part too is that what do people want to pursue in their wellness? What choices are they willing to make? Give them some options. Let them choose, because it doesn't, what I want and what you want may not be the same thing, and what I need and you need may not be the same thing.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think that's a big part too, is that, like you said, it's person-centered, holistic wellness.
Yeah. This is a great topic. I mean, this is a really great topic. I feel like you and I could keep talking about this, because it's deep. There's a lot here. There's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
And as people in recovery, we have been through the system and different programs. And once you have sustained recovery, you can look back and say, oh, geez, it's like, there's so much more that could be happening. And so, yeah, I mean, it fires the flames of passion in me, to want to go advocate for more, right? And get these kinds of things incorporated into the system. So maybe we'll come back to this on another podcast and visit with it, and maybe even bring on a guest. This would be a good topic with a guest, to have another person with their views of, the early recovery and the elements of really being well. overall. Yeah. All right. Well, we want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Talks, and check us out every week. We're putting up podcasts on different topics, having guests. And if you have an idea, if you were listening and you're like, oh, they should talk about this, or, email us. You can email me at jim@mtpeernetwork.org.
Or you can email me at mandy@mtpeernetwork.org. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen with us. We really appreciate it. We hope you heard something that ignites that fire of passion within you too. And we hope that you take a look at your own full wellness today.
Definitely. Thanks.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works. Recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.